Isabella Rossi's world teetered on the edge of collapse. 4 days until rent was due, a dwindling balance of $312 in her bank account, and a mountain of medical bills from her grandmother's hospital stay loomed over her like an unrelenting storm. The translation work that had once been a steady, albeit modest, source of income had mysteriously dried up just as fate conspired against her. Facing the abyss of financial desperation, her lifeline existed in the dimly lit corner of Café Napoli, nestled in Boston's historic North End. That café was a sanctuary, a place dense with a scent of freshly ground espresso and simmering garlic, where brick walls held the hush of decades' worth of whispered secrets and heartfelt stories. For Isabella, Tuesdays had always belonged to that worn wooden stage, barely elevated above the floor, where she stepped under the soft glow of a single, intimate spotlight. Her voice carried the ancient Neapolitan songs her grandmother had taught her, notes steeped in nostalgia and heartbreak that bewitched the regular patrons. Old Italian men who swallowed tears into their wine, young lovers who leaned closer, hands brushing lightly in the shadows. Tonight was different. The atmosphere felt taut, a quiet tension threading through the murmurs of the crowd. Perhaps it was just her nerves, the weight of mounting bills, or the hollow quiet of her apartment lacking Nona's comforting presence. Isabella drew a shaky breath and closed her eyes, borrowing strength from deep inside to release the first haunting notes of Anima, a song layered with the rich, thick dialect of her grandmother's village near Naples. Each word was a bridge across time, a tender grasp at a past that could no longer be touched. The room quieted as the melody filled the space, swallowing the clatter of dishes and distant laughter. Isabella poured herself into the song, the melody a balm that seemed to slow even the relentless tick of her anxieties. Yet just as the second verse floated through the air, a sudden awareness pulled her eyes open. Near the entrance stood a man, a stranger, motionless as if carved from shadow and light. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a suit that spoke of quiet, expensive power. His dark eyes locked onto her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. 2 unsmiling men flanked him, their posture rigid, silent guardians of a dangerous presence. His gaze was unwavering, memorizing every breath, every trembling note she dared to release into the stillness. Somewhere deep inside, a silent warning flickered. This man was not like the others who frequented the café. There was something about him, haunted and commanding, that unsettled her, pulled at the edges of the fragile thread she was clinging to. She finished the song beneath applause that seemed distant, unreal. The crowd parted instinctively as he moved forward, power radiating from him with a weight that pressed in the small space between them. His voice, low and rough, broke through her veil of nerves. "Where did you learn that song?" Her heart pounded. She met his gaze and answered truthfully, "My grandmother taught me." He took a step closer, the scent of cedar and something darker, richer, surrounding her senses. That version, the dialect. Where is she from? A small village outside Naples, Cassera province. His voice faltered on the next words, heavy with unspoken grief. My mother only sang it that way. She died 19 years ago. Isabella felt a shared pulse of sorrow, an unspoken understanding that tethered their fates in that charged moment. With the café returning to its rhythm around them, they remained suspended in a bubble of recognition and loss. 2 souls drawn together by a song, a secret, and the shadow of an uncertain future. Figure who will irrevocably change her life. The next morning, Isabella's world felt even more precarious. She woke to the harsh light of reality. Her phone screen flashing reminders of overdue bills, her grandmother's frail voice echoing from the bedroom, and the memory of last night's encounter at Café Napoli lingering like a half-remembered dream. The stranger's intensity haunted her, his words replaying in her mind. The only person I've ever heard sing it that way was my mother. She tried to shake it off, focusing on the day ahead. But as she brewed a cup of cheap coffee, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text was brief, direct, and oddly formal. Isabella Rossi, this is Luca Vitali. I need your help. My office, 10 a.m. address below. The name sent a chill through her. She'd heard whispers about the Vitali family, old money, old power, and rumors of darker things. But desperation outweighed caution. She couldn't afford to ignore a job offer, especially one that might pay enough to keep her and her grandmother afloat. Isabella dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were professional but understated. She tucked her grandmother in with a promise to return soon, then stepped out into the brisk Boston morning, nerves jangling with every step. The address led her to a converted brownstone in the financial district, its facade blending historic charm with modern security. A uniformed receptionist greeted her, eyes flickering with recognition as she announced her name. "Mr. Vitali is expecting you," the woman said, her tone respectful but wary. Inside, the office was nothing like the cold, corporate spaces Isabella had imagined. Instead, it felt like a library. Mahogany shelves lined with books, leather chairs arranged for conversation, sunlight filtering through tall windows. Luca stood by the window, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. He turned as she entered, the same intensity from the cafe now tempered by daylight. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a table where 3 archival boxes sat waiting. "Coffee." He made it himself, the ritual oddly intimate. Isabella accepted, her hands trembling as she took the cup. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged with something unspoken. "These are my mother's letters," Luca explained, his voice softer now. "Correspondence with family in Italy, personal journals, notes about recipes and history. Some are typed, most are handwritten. I need them translated properly, with respect for the dialect and the context." Isabella opened the first box, the scent of old paper and faded ink rising to meet her. She found a photograph tucked between the pages, a dark-haired woman laughing, her eyes unmistakably Luca's. "She was beautiful," Isabella murmured, feeling the weight of the family's history settle around her. "She was everything," Luca replied, his voice rough. "Take your time. There's no rush." But Isabella sensed urgency beneath his words, a need for answers that went beyond nostalgia. As she began to read, translating aloud for Luca, she realized this was more than a job. The letters were filled with warmth, humor, and fierce love, but also hints of secrets and warnings. Luca listened intently, sometimes moving closer, sometimes turning away to hide the emotion in his eyes. The connection between them deepened, not just professional but personal, forged in the shared experience of loss and longing. By noon they had fallen into a rhythm, Isabella reading, Luca listening, both of them navigating the delicate terrain of memory and grief. Lunch arrived, real food from a local place, and they talked about music, family, and the slow process of healing. Isabella shared stories of her grandmother's sacrifices. Luca revealed the pain of losing his mother to cancer. The walls between them began to crumble, replaced by a fragile trust. As the afternoon wore on, Isabella found a letter that hinted at danger, a refusal of a marriage proposal from a powerful Calabrian family, a warning about enemies who might seek revenge. Luca's demeanor shifted, his focus sharpening. The job was no longer just about translation. It was about uncovering truths that could threaten everything. Isabella left the office that evening with a check in her bag and more questions than answers. She knew she was crossing a line, stepping into a world where secrets could be deadly. But she also knew she couldn't turn back. The connection with Luca was undeniable, and the work ahead promised to change both their lives. The city's morning rush had faded by the time Isabella stepped out of Luca Vitali's brownstone office, but her heart was still racing. The check in her purse felt heavier than it should, a symbol of the choice she'd just made. She'd agreed to translate his mother's letters, knowing full well that this job was more than a simple act of language. It was a step into a world she'd only glimpsed in rumors and headlines, a world where power and danger walked hand in hand. She paused on the sidewalk, the autumn wind tugging at her coat, and glanced back at the building. The windows reflected nothing but blue sky, giving no hint of the secrets hidden inside. For a moment, Isabella considered turning back, returning the check, and walking away from whatever complications Luca represented. But the memory of his haunted eyes, the way he'd listened to her read his mother's words, and the desperate need in his voice when he'd asked for her help. All of it pulled her forward. Back at her apartment, Isabella found her grandmother dozing in the living room, a blanket tucked around her frail shoulders. She set the check on the kitchen table, staring at it as if it might vanish. The money would buy time, maybe even hope, but it came with strings she couldn't yet see. She made tea, her hands trembling, and tried to focus on the practical. Bills to pay, groceries to buy, prescriptions to refill. But her mind kept drifting back to Luca, to the way his presence had filled the room, to the secret she'd glimpsed in his mother's letters. That afternoon, she began the translation in earnest. The first letter was dated nearly 30 years ago, the handwriting elegant but urgent. Maria Vitali wrote of family gatherings, recipes, and the ache of missing home, but there were also hints of fear, of threats from distant relatives, of alliances and betrayals whispered in the shadows. Isabella's breath caught as she realized the stakes. These weren't just family stories. They were pieces of a puzzle that might explain why Luca needed her, and why he trusted no one else. As the hours passed, Isabella lost herself in the work. The words became a lifeline, connecting her to a woman she'd never met and to a man she barely knew. She found herself wondering about Luca's childhood, about the weight he carried, about the choices that had shaped him into the man who'd stood in the cafe, transfixed by a song. That evening Luca called. His voice was softer than she remembered, edged with exhaustion. "Did you find anything?" he asked. "Your mother was careful," Isabella replied. "She wrote about family, but there are things she didn't say directly. I think she was afraid someone might read her letters." There was a pause. "That's why I need you," Luca said quietly. "You understand the silences, the things left unsaid." Isabella hesitated, the line between translator and confidant blurring. "I'll keep going," she promised. "I'll let you know if I find anything important." After the call, Isabella sat in the quiet of her apartment, the city's lights flickering outside her window. She knew she'd crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. The job was no longer just about money. It was about trust, about secrets, about the possibility of redemption for both Luca and herself. And as she turned back to the next letter, Isabella realized she was no longer just translating words. She was translating lives, and her own was now inextricably entwined with his. The next few days blurred into a quiet routine, the kind Isabella hadn't known in months. Each morning she returned to Luca's brownstone, her nerves gradually replaced by a sense of purpose. The translation work was demanding. Maria Vitali's letters were written in a flowing, sometimes cryptic hand, full of idioms and references that only someone with deep cultural roots could untangle. But Isabella found herself drawn in, not just by the language, but by the woman behind the words. Luca was always there, hovering at the edge of the room. He rarely interrupted, but Isabella could feel his presence, steady, watchful, and at times unexpectedly vulnerable. He'd bring her coffee, sometimes sitting across from her in silence, sometimes pacing the room as if wrestling with ghosts only he could see. The air between them was charged, not just with the tension of their professional arrangement, but with something deeper, a growing recognition of shared loss and longing. One afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the tall windows, Isabella paused over a letter dated the year Luca's mother died. The words were raw, full of fear and hope, and as she read them aloud, her voice trembled. Luca listened, his expression unreadable, but when she finished, he turned away quickly, blinking hard. "She always wrote like that," he said, his voice rough. "Like she was trying to hold the world together with words." Isabella set the letter down, her own eyes stinging. "She loved you fiercely. It's in every line." A silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time, Isabella saw past Luca's armor, the tailored suits, the commanding presence, and glimpsed the boy who had lost his mother too soon. She realized that beneath the power and reputation, he was still searching for answers, still trying to make sense of a world that had taken so much from him. Their rhythm became almost domestic. They'd work through the letters, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes sharing stories of their families. Isabella told him about her grandmother's stubbornness, her love of music, the sacrifices she'd made to give Isabella a better life. Luca, in turn, spoke of his mother's laughter, his father's ambition, and the weight of expectations that had shaped him from a young age. One evening, as they finished for the day, Luca surprised her. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he said quietly. "Most people want something from me. You just want to understand." Isabella met his gaze, her heart pounding. "Maybe I just know what it's like to lose someone and want to hold on to whatever's left." A tentative smile flickered across Luca's face, the first real one she'd seen. In that moment, the distance between them shrank, not erased but bridged by empathy and respect. The bond that had begun with a song was deepening, rooted now in shared experience and mutual recognition. As Isabella left that night, the city lights shimmering on the wet pavement, she realized something had shifted. She was no longer just a translator or a desperate woman clinging to a lifeline. She was becoming part of Luca's world, not through force or fear, but through understanding and trust. And for the first time in a long while, hope felt like something she could reach for, even in the shadow of danger. The fragile peace Isabella had found in Luca's brownstone was shattered one evening by a single phone call. She was deep in translation, tracing the elegant loops of Maria Vitali's handwriting, when Luca's right-hand man, Marco, burst into the room. His face pale and voice urgent. "Boss, we have a problem. Someone intercepted a message about the letters. They know she's working for you." Luca's expression hardened, the vulnerability Isabella had glimpsed earlier replaced by the cold calculation of a man used to danger. He moved quickly, issuing orders in rapid Italian, his voice low but commanding. Marco relayed updates. A convoy ambush outside the brownstone, surveillance footage showing unfamiliar cars circling the block, encrypted threats from a rival Mafia family. The tension in the air was palpable, every shadow in the room suddenly suspect. Isabella's heart pounded as she realized the implications. She was no longer just a translator. She was a liability, a target. The letters she'd been working on, filled with secrets, warnings and coded references, were now at the center of a brewing storm. Luca turned to her, his eyes fierce. "You need to stay close. No one leaves the house until I say so." The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Luca's security team swept the building, checking every window and door. Marco coordinated with outside contacts, his phone never leaving his hand. Isabella tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to her grandmother, alone in their apartment, vulnerable to threats she couldn't even imagine. As night fell, the brownstone became a fortress. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. Luca stayed by Isabella's side, his demeanor protective but tense. He explained the situation in clipped sentences. A rival family had learned about the letters, and they wanted whatever secrets Maria Vitali had left behind. The danger was real and it was closing in. Isabella struggled to process the shift. The quiet intimacy of their earlier days was gone, replaced by a sense of siege. She watched Luca move through the house, coordinating defenses, his every gesture radiating authority. Yet beneath the surface, she saw the toll it was taking, the way his jaw clenched, the fatigue in his eyes, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. In a rare moment of quiet, Luca sat beside Isabella, his voice softer. "I'm sorry you're caught in this. I never wanted you to be in danger." Isabella met his gaze, her own fear tempered by resolve. "I knew the risks when I agreed to help. I won't run." Their hands brushed, a silent promise passing between them. The connection they'd forged through shared grief and trust was now being tested by external threats. Isabella felt the tension between danger and safety, the line she'd crossed growing sharper with every passing hour. As midnight approached, Marco returned with news. The rival family was escalating, sending messages that made it clear they wouldn't back down. Luca's response was swift and decisive. "We moved to the safe house. Now." Isabella gathered her things, her heart heavy but determined. She glanced back at the brownstone, knowing that the world she'd entered was more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Luca was beside her, and together, they would face whatever came next. Scene 5 raises the stakes, introducing external threats and forcing Isabella and Luca to confront the reality of their dangerous world. The tension between them grows, their bond tested by the escalating conflict, and the story moves inexorably toward the next phase. Survival and secrets in the safe house. ##### Scene 5. Danger arrives. The fragile rhythm Isabella and Luca had built was shattered by a single phone call. Isabella was deep in translation, her mind lost in Maria Vitali's careful script, when Marco's voice cut through the quiet. "Boss, we have a problem." The urgency in his tone made Isabella's heart stutter. Luca's face darkened as Marco relayed the news. A convoy ambush outside the brownstone, unfamiliar cars circling the block, encrypted threats from a rival Mafia family. The letters Isabella was translating had become a beacon for danger. Luca's demeanor shifted instantly. The vulnerability Isabella had glimpsed in him was replaced by the cold, precise authority of a man used to living on the edge. He issued orders in rapid Italian, his voice low and commanding. Marco moved with practiced efficiency, coordinating security, checking every window and door. The brownstone, once a sanctuary, now felt like a fortress under siege. Isabella's mind raced. She was no longer just a translator. She was a liability, a target. The secret she'd been uncovering in Maria's letters, coded warnings, hints of betrayal, were now at the center of a brewing storm. Luca turned to her, his eyes fierce. "You need to stay close. No one leaves the house until I say so." The hours that followed blurred together. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. Isabella tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting to her grandmother, alone in their apartment, vulnerable to threats she couldn't even imagine. Luca stayed by her side, protective but tense, explaining the situation in clipped sentences. The rival family wanted whatever secrets Maria Vitali had left behind, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get them. In a rare moment of quiet, Luca sat beside Isabella, his voice softer. "I'm sorry you're caught in this. I never wanted you to be in danger." Isabella met his gaze, her own fear tempered by resolve. "I knew the risks when I agreed to help. I won't run." Their hands brushed, a silent promise passing between them. The connection they'd forged through shared grief and trust was now being tested by external threats. Isabella felt the tension between danger and safety, the line she'd crossed growing sharper with every passing hour. As midnight approached, Marco returned with news. The rival family was escalating, sending messages that made it clear they wouldn't back down. Luca's response was swift and decisive. "We moved to the safe house. Now." Isabella gathered her things, her heart heavy but determined. She glanced back at the brownstone, knowing that the world she'd entered was more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Luca was beside her, and together, they would face whatever came next. The drive to the safe house was tense and silent, the city's lights blurring past the tinted windows of Luca's armored car. Isabella clutched her bag, her mind racing with worry for her grandmother and the weight of the secrets she now carried. Marco sat up front, eyes scanning every intersection, while Luca remained beside her, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. The safe house itself was nothing like Isabella expected. From the outside, it looked like any other suburban home, modest, unassuming, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a faded mailbox. But inside it was a fortress. Security cameras watched every entrance, reinforced doors and windows sealed off the world, and a discreet team of guards patrolled the perimeter. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and new furniture, a place designed for comfort but built for survival. Isabella was shown to a guest room, its walls bare except for a single painting, a sunlit Italian landscape that reminded her of her grandmother's stories. She unpacked in silence, the reality of her situation settling in. She was a guest, but also a protected asset, her safety now entwined with Luca's own. That evening, Luca joined her in the kitchen, where Marco had prepared a simple meal. The three of them ate together, the conversation cautious but genuine. Marco, usually stoic, revealed a dry sense of humor, telling stories of his own family's roots in Sicily and the odd jobs he'd worked before joining Luca's crew. Isabella found herself laughing, the tension easing for a moment. After dinner, Luca led Isabella to a study lined with books and old photographs. He poured them both a glass of wine, his guard dropping as he spoke about his mother's legacy. "She wanted me to build something better than what my father left behind," he admitted. "But every time I try, the past finds a way to pull me back." Isabella listened, her empathy growing. She shared stories of her grandmother's sacrifices, the way she'd held their family together through hardship and loss. The contrast between their worlds, her modest upbringing and Luca's life of power and danger, became a bridge rather than a barrier. They spoke late into the night, trading memories and fears, their connection deepening with every shared secret. As the hours passed, Isabella realized how much she'd come to trust Luca. Beneath his hardened exterior was a man shaped by grief and responsibility, someone who understood the cost of loyalty and the pain of sacrifice. She saw the vulnerability he tried to hide, the longing for redemption that colored his every decision. Before heading to bed, Luca paused at the doorway. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No one will touch you. Not while I'm alive." Isabella nodded, her heart pounding. She knew the danger wasn't over, but for the first time she felt protected, not just by walls and guards, but by the bond she was building with Luca and Marco. The safe house was more than a refuge. It was a place where secrets could be shared, where trust could grow, and where the lines between their worlds began to blur. As she drifted off to sleep, Isabella wondered what tomorrow would bring. The threats outside were real, but inside these walls, she had found something unexpected. A sense of belonging and the first fragile hope that she might survive, and even thrive, in Luca's world. The safe house was a fortress, but within its walls, a fragile new world was beginning to take shape. Isabella found herself settling into a rhythm that was both foreign and comforting. The constant presence of armed guards, the reinforced doors, and the surveillance cameras were stark reminders of the danger lurking outside. But inside, there was a tentative peace. Luca's injury from the recent ambush was more serious than he let on. A sniper's bullet had grazed his shoulder, and though he insisted on working through the pain, Isabella could see the toll it took. One afternoon, as Luca sat at the large oak desk reviewing security reports, Isabella approached with a medical kit she'd insisted on bringing. "Let me help," she said softly. He hesitated, pride warring with necessity, but finally nodded. As she cleaned and dressed the wound, their hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through both of them. The intimacy of the moment was undeniable, a stark contrast to the violence that had brought them here. Luca's usual guarded demeanor softened, and for the first time, Isabella saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath the powerful exterior. Their partnership deepened beyond the professional. Isabella became more than a translator. She was a strategist, an advisor, and a confidant. She filtered security reports, prioritized threats, and helped Luca make decisions that balanced caution with boldness. Luca, in turn, shared pieces of his world, stories of his mother's hopes, his father's ruthless rise, and the heavy burden of leadership. One evening, as they reviewed a particularly troubling intelligence report, Luca looked up at Isabella with a rare softness. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." Isabella smiled, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the room's dim lighting. "Years of freelance work taught me how to juggle competing demands." Their conversations often drifted from business to personal, revealing layers of pain, hope, and resilience. Isabella shared memories of her grandmother's strength and sacrifices, while Luca spoke of the loneliness that came with power and the fear of losing those he loved. The safe house, once a symbol of confinement, became a place of healing. They found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the chaos outside. The tension between danger and safety, power and vulnerability, began to weave a complex tapestry of trust and desire. As Luca's shoulder healed, their connection grew more palpable. Small gestures, a lingering touch, a shared glance, hinted at feelings neither was ready to name but both felt deeply. The line between protector and partner blurred, setting the stage for a bond that would be tested by the trials ahead. In the quiet moments before sleep, Isabella often found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here, from a struggling singer in a small cafe to a key player in a dangerous game of loyalty and survival. And beside her, Luca was no longer just a powerful mafia boss. He was a man capable of tenderness, shaped by loss but reaching for something better. Together they were beginning to build something new, a partnership forged in adversity, strengthened by trust, and fueled by a shared hope for redemption. The days in the safe house blurred together, marked by routines of security checks, translation work, and quiet meals. Yet beneath the surface, something profound was shifting between Isabella and Luca. The constant threat outside had forced them into close quarters, and the walls that had once separated their worlds began to crumble. One evening, after a long day spent deciphering Maria Vitali's coded warnings, Isabella found herself alone in the study, her thoughts tangled with worry and longing. Luca entered quietly, his presence filling the room with a gravity she'd come to recognize. He poured 2 glasses of wine and sat beside her, the silence between them comfortable, almost intimate. They talked about everything and nothing: music, family, the ache of loss, and the strange comfort of shared solitude. Luca confessed the guilt he carried for the choices he'd made, the violence he'd sanctioned, and the people he'd lost. Isabella listened, her empathy deepening with every word. She revealed her own fears: the possibility of losing her grandmother, the uncertainty of her future, and the loneliness that had haunted her since childhood. As the conversation drifted, the tension between them grew palpable. Luca reached for Isabella's hand, his touch gentle but deliberate. "You make me want to be better," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just for my family but for myself." Isabella's heart pounded. She met his gaze, seeing the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly. "We're in this together." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Luca leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. The fear, the danger, the weight of their responsibilities, all faded in the warmth of their connection. Their first kiss was tentative, a question as much as an answer. It was a promise of trust, of partnership, of something real in a world built on secrets and lies. The intimacy was not just physical but emotional, a merging of 2 souls who had survived loss and found hope in each other. Afterward, they sat together in the quiet, hands entwined, hearts open. The safe house, once a place of confinement, had become a sanctuary for their growing love. The line between protector and partner had vanished, replaced by a bond forged in adversity and strengthened by vulnerability. As Isabella drifted off to sleep that night, Luca's arm around her, she realized that the greatest danger was not the threats outside, but the risk of opening her heart. Yet for the first time she was willing to take that risk. In Luca, she had found not just safety, but the possibility of a future built on trust, respect, and love. The safe house had become a fragile sanctuary, but the outside world refused to stay quiet. One morning, Isabella awoke to the sound of Luca's phone ringing, his voice tense as he spoke in rapid Italian. Marco entered, his face grim. "There's been a development," he said. "Your sister Chiara has been taken." The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. Her younger sister, the only family she had left, was now a pawn in a brutal game. The rival Mafia family had struck back, targeting her blood to force Luca's hand. Isabella's world spun, fear, guilt, and rage colliding in her chest. She blamed herself for bringing danger to Chiara's doorstep, for crossing the line into Luca's world. Luca's reaction was immediate and fierce. He gathered his men, issued orders, and began tracing every lead. But Isabella saw the conflict in his eyes, the need to protect her, the code of honor that demanded he act, and the knowledge that any misstep could cost innocent lives. The tension between his ruthless reputation and the vulnerability he showed with her was sharper than ever. Isabella insisted on being part of the rescue plan. "She's my sister. I won't sit here and do nothing." Luca hesitated, torn between keeping her safe and respecting her strength. "This isn't just about you anymore," he said quietly. "It's about all of us." The hours dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Isabella wrestled with her own moral boundaries. She'd always believed in loyalty, in family above all, but now she was forced to confront the cost of those beliefs. Was she willing to risk everything, her safety, her future, even her soul, to save Chiara? And what did it mean to trust Luca, a man whose world was built on violence and secrets? As the crisis escalated, Isabella and Luca's partnership was tested. They argued over strategy, over risk, over the line between justice and revenge. Marco, ever loyal, offered his support, but the weight of responsibility fell squarely on Luca's shoulders. He promised Isabella he would do everything in his power to bring Chiara home, but he also warned her, "Sometimes, the choices we make in this world have consequences we can't escape." Isabella spent the night pacing the safe house, her mind racing with memories of her sister. Childhood laughter, whispered secrets, promises made and broken. She realized that her love for Chiara was both her greatest strength and her deepest vulnerability. The danger was real, but so was the hope that she could make a difference. In the darkest hour before dawn, Luca found Isabella in the study, her eyes red from sleeplessness. He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "We'll get her back," he vowed. "But you have to trust me. You have to trust us." Isabella nodded, her resolve hardening. She was no longer just a victim or a bystander. She was a partner in this fight, willing to face whatever came for the sake of family and love. The moral crisis had forced her to choose, and she chose to stand with Luca, no matter the cost. The plan was set in motion before dawn, every detail mapped out with the precision of a chess match. Luca's network had traced the rival family's hideout to an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge, a place chosen for its isolation and the message it sent. Isabella, refusing to be sidelined, insisted on being part of the operation. Her knowledge of the coded messages in Maria's letters had revealed a pattern, a clue to the rival boss's next move. The safe house buzzed with tension as Luca's men prepared. Marco handed Isabella a discreet earpiece and a small pistol, his expression grave. "Stay close to Luca. If anything goes wrong, you run. Don't look back." Isabella nodded, her resolve steeled by fear and love. They arrived at the warehouse under cover of darkness. The air was thick with anticipation, every shadow a potential threat. Luca's men fanned out, taking up positions. Isabella and Luca moved together, their partnership now a seamless blend of trust and necessity. She could feel his anxiety, masked by the calm authority he projected to his crew. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of crates and echoing footsteps. The rival boss waited in the center, Chiara bound to a chair, her face bruised but defiant. The sight of her sister sent a surge of adrenaline through Isabella, but she forced herself to stay focused. This was a negotiation as much as a rescue, and one wrong move could end in bloodshed. Luca stepped forward, his voice cold and controlled. "You have what you want. Now let her go." The rival boss sneered, his menacing presence amplified by the armed guards flanking him. "You think you can just walk in here and make demands? You brought this on yourself, Vitali. You and your translator." Isabella's heart pounded as she caught the subtle signal from Marco. Backup was in place, waiting for her cue. She spoke up, her voice steady. "You want the letters. You want the secrets Maria Vitali left behind. But you're making a mistake. If you hurt my sister, you'll never get what you want." The rival boss hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Luca seized the moment, offering a trade: the letters for Chiara's safe return. It was a bluff. Isabella had already encrypted the most sensitive information, ensuring the rival family would get nothing of value. The tension in the room was electric, every second stretching taut. Suddenly a shot rang out, a warning, not a kill. Chaos erupted as Luca's men stormed in, overwhelming the rival guards. Isabella rushed to Chiara, her hands shaking as she untied the ropes. The sisters embraced, relief and tears mingling in the chaos. Luca confronted the rival boss, his code of honor on full display. "This ends now. You cross this line again, and there will be no negotiation." The rival boss, defeated and humiliated, was taken into custody by Luca's men. The warehouse emptied, the danger finally receding. Outside, under the pale morning light, Isabella clung to Chiara, her heart pounding with gratitude and exhaustion. Luca approached, his eyes softening as he looked at the two sisters. "You were brave," he said quietly. "Both of you." For the first time, Isabella felt the full weight of what they had survived, and the strength of the partnership she and Luca had forged. Together they had faced the darkness and emerged, battered but unbroken, ready to build a new future. The warehouse raid had ended, but the battle for control was far from over. Luca's victory in rescuing Chiara sent ripples through the underworld, shaking the fragile balance of power. The rival Mafia family, humiliated and weakened, was forced to retreat, but their threat lingered like a shadow over every move Luca made. Back at the safe house, the atmosphere was heavy with relief and exhaustion. Chiara was safe, but the cost of her kidnapping weighed on everyone. Isabella sat beside her sister, holding her hand, feeling the fragile thread of family pull tighter than ever. Luca entered, his face a mask of controlled fury and determination. "We've sent a clear message," Luca said, his voice low but resolute. "This territory is ours. Anyone who tries to challenge that will pay the price." Isabella watched as Luca moved through the room, commanding respect and loyalty from his men. But beneath the surface, she saw the toll the conflict had taken, the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance, the burden of leadership. She realized that Luca's power was not just in his strength, but in his ability to protect those he loved, even at great personal cost. The rival family's retreat sparked a power struggle within Luca's own organization. Old alliances were tested, and new threats emerged from within. Luca faced challenges not only from outside enemies but from those who questioned his leadership and motives. Isabella stood by his side, her role evolving from translator to trusted advisor and partner. Together, they navigated the treacherous waters of Mafia politics, balancing the need for strength with the desire for change. Luca began the slow, careful process of transforming his organization, moving away from violence and intimidation toward legitimate business ventures. Isabella's insights and intelligence became invaluable in this transition, helping to build a future that honored Maria Vitali's legacy. One evening, as they reviewed plans for a new shipping company, Luca turned to Isabella with a rare softness. "You've changed everything," he said. "Not just for me, but for all of us." Isabella smiled, feeling the weight of their journey, the losses, the battles, the moments of hope. "We're building something better. Together." The road ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and difficult choices. But for the first time, Isabella and Luca faced it as partners, united by love, loyalty, and a shared vision for a new life. Months had passed since the storm of violence and betrayal had shaken Luca's world. The city's underworld had shifted, territories redrawn, and old enemies subdued. But the true transformation was happening quietly, behind closed doors. Luca and Isabella stood at the threshold of a new chapter, not just for their lives, but for the legacy they were building together. The safe house had long since shed its fortress-like aura, replaced by a warm, inviting home filled with light, art, and the echoes of laughter. Isabella had taken the lead in designing the space, filling it with books, photographs, and touches of her grandmother's spirit. It was a sanctuary where love and hope could grow, even in the shadow of their past. Luca's vision was clear: to transition from the violent, shadowy world of organized crime to legitimate business ventures that could sustain their empire and protect their family. The shipping company they were acquiring was just the beginning, a foothold in the legal economy that promised stability and respectability. Isabella's role had evolved beyond translator and advisor. She was now a partner in every sense, her insights and intelligence shaping decisions that balanced ambition with caution. Together, they navigated the complexities of business negotiations, legal challenges, and the delicate dance of maintaining old alliances while forging new paths. One crisp spring afternoon, Luca took Isabella to a small, well-tended cemetery on the outskirts of the city. They stood before a simple headstone, fresh flowers resting in the vase. "Maria Vitali," Luca said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother. The woman who started all of this." Isabella reached out, touching the cool stone. "She would be proud of what you're building." Luca nodded, a rare smile breaking through his usual stoicism. "And proud of you. You've changed everything." Their journey had been marked by danger, loss, and sacrifice, but it had also been a testament to resilience and love. The partnership they'd forged was stronger than any threat, built on trust, respect, and a shared vision for a future where family came first. As they walked back toward the city, hand in hand, Isabella felt a profound sense of belonging. The life they were building was complicated and fraught with challenges, but it was theirs, messy, beautiful, and real. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined them. Together, they faced the future with hope, ready to write the next chapter of their story, one of redemption, partnership, and enduring love.